Last winter, I decided to take a break from everything. My job, my phone, social media, the constant noise of life. Burnout was boiling just beneath my skin, and I needed a reset. So I found this place on Airbnb, a remote A-frame cabin tucked deep into the mountains of Colorado. The listing called it a digital detox retreat. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, solar-powered. Just snow, silence, and seclusion. Exactly what I thought I needed. The pictures were stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto a valley blanketed in untouched snow. Inside it was cozy. Fireplace, wood-paneled walls, bookshelves stocked with dusty hardcovers, and a clawfoot tub with candles lined along the sill. Perfect. The host, someone named Dale, messaged me before the trip with clear check-in instructions and one odd note at the end. Please don't open the basement. It's for storage and off-limits. I reread that line. Basement? The listing never mentioned one, but I shrugged it off. Probably where they kept cleaning supplies or backup batteries or something boring. I arrived just after dusk. The sky was turning lavender behind the pine trees, and frost already dusted the porch railing. I stepped inside and was immediately struck by how quiet it was. Not the kind of quiet that's peaceful, but the kind that almost rings in your ears. A cabin like that should creak and groan, but it was still. Too still. I chalked it up to the snow-absorbing sound. There was no cell signal, just like the ad promised, so I leaned into the experience, lit a fire, made some tea, picked up a book, and curled into the couch under a knitted blanket. Hours passed like a dream. Then sometime after midnight, I woke to a noise. Footsteps. Not the subtle creaks of an old house settling. These were deliberate, heavy, slow, like boots, on concrete, beneath me. I froze in bed, holding my breath, listened. A pause, then another footstep, then two more, then silence. I sat up, pulse thudding in my ears. The cabin was small. Kitchen, bedroom, living room, bath. No basement. So where the hell were the footsteps coming from? I grabbed my phone out of instinct, even though I knew it had no signal. Then remembered Dale's instructions. I messaged him on Airbnb anyway, just in case something queued up and sent later. My text read, "Hey, pretty sure I heard footsteps downstairs, but there is no downstairs, right?" His reply came 3 minutes later. "Dale, must be the pipes." I stared at the screen. Pipes? At 3 a.m.? Walking? It unsettled me more that he replied so quickly. I tried to sleep again, telling myself it was the wind or maybe some kind of mountain animal. But there was no wind, and the footsteps had sounded human.
The next morning, I decided to explore the cabin more carefully. In the daylight, it felt safer, smaller too, less menacing. But something still nagged at me. That sense that something was off. It wasn't just the footsteps or Dale's vague replies. It was the way the living room carpet never sat flat. One corner kept curling up, as if the floor underneath wasn't level. I knelt and tried to smooth it, but then felt something odd beneath. A seam. A square-shaped ridge, barely visible, hidden beneath the carpet fibers. My heartbeat quickened. I peeled the rug back, hands trembling slightly. Beneath it was a trap door. Faded wood, cracked along the edges, no handle, and bolted shut from the inside. That's when I felt it again, that cold breath of dread against the back of my neck. The realization that someone might already be inside whatever was beneath me. I backed away slowly, called Dale again. This time, he didn't answer. Instead, after about 5 minutes, I got a message on the Airbnb app. Don't go near that door. Leave it alone. You're not supposed to see that. Not, sorry for the confusion, or I'll explain. Just cold, abrupt words that made my stomach knot up. I didn't wait around. Grabbed my backpack, jammed my things in, and got out. Drove 2 hours until I found a gas station with a payphone. Called a friend. Called Airbnb. Filed a report. The whole time, I kept feeling like something, or someone, was watching me. Like eyes had followed me up through that trap door and into my car. I thought that was the end of it. I tried to move on. Went back to work. Started using my phone again. Pretended it was just a strange experience and that I'd overreacted. Then nearly a year later, I saw something that made my blood freeze. It was an article, one of those sensational local stories that go viral for a day and vanish. The headline read, "Fugitive found living in homeowners' crawl spaces across Colorado." The article described a man who had been on the run for over a decade. He'd mastered the art of hiding in the least expected places, inside crawl spaces, attics, false walls, and yes, trapdoor basements. In each case, he picked homes that were rarely visited or remote, ones where he could slip in undetected and stay. In 2 of the homes, the families had noticed small things, missing food, strange noises at night, the kind of things that sound crazy when you report them. One woman said she thought her place was haunted until police found claw marks on the inside of her closet wall. My heart pounded as I scrolled down. There, buried halfway through the piece, was a sentence that stopped me cold. Authorities are investigating a cabin in the Elk Ridge region after traces of human activity were found beneath a sealed floor hatch. The property had been listed on Airbnb under multiple aliases. Elk Ridge. That was where I had stayed. I went back to Airbnb. Tried to find the listing. Gone. Like it never existed. I checked my email confirmations, the messages from Dale, even the photos I'd taken the first night. All the Airbnb links led to page not found. It was like the whole thing had been erased. But I still had the photo I'd taken the first night, the one from the living room couch, firelight dancing against the windows. When I zoomed in, I noticed something I'd never seen before. In the corner, just barely visible through the reflection, a face watching me. I handed over everything I had to the police. Photos, messages, payment receipts. They didn't say much, just that they were looking into it. Said that some of these Airbnb-style listings were actually privately owned properties sublet under false identities. Hard to track. Easy to vanish. Sometimes, I think I hear those footsteps again. Even in my apartment, middle of the night. That same slow, deliberate cadence on concrete, like something is beneath me, waiting.
I had always romanticized the idea of living in Europe for a few months, a creative sabbatical of sorts. I was a freelance writer, mostly travel and lifestyle blogs, with the occasional horror fiction piece when I needed to vent darker thoughts. So when I landed a 3-month house-sitting gig in Barcelona through an exclusive listing on a private expat network, it felt like fate. The apartment was stunning. An open-plan loft with industrial ceilings, polished concrete floors, and, oddly enough, floor-to-ceiling mirrors in every single room. Living room, kitchen, hallway, even the bathroom had a full mirrored wall. The entire place shimmered with reflections during the day, casting shifting light and dancing glares across surfaces. It was unsettling at first, but I figured it was just the aesthetic. Europeans were known for their strange taste in modern art, weren't they? The host, Alejandro, had never shown his face. All communication had been through a concierge named Marta, who handed me a vintage key at a quiet little cafe in Gracia. Along with the key came a black leather-bound notebook. She said Alejandro left specific instructions for the apartment. I remember flipping through the first few pages as I sipped my cortado. The notes were oddly formal. Close the bedroom curtains by sunset. Never sleep facing the mirrors. Do not remove or tamper with the mirrors. If something taps from the other side, do not respond. I chuckled. Is this some kind of performance art? I asked Marta. She didn't laugh. He was very serious about the rules. Please follow them. Maybe I should have paid attention to her tone. I moved in on a Thursday afternoon. The building was in El Ravo, gritty, charming, and walking distance from the Gothic Quarter. The elevator was antique, one of those clunky iron cage things that rattled and groaned up every floor. The hallway outside the unit was silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. There was only one door on the floor, mine. Inside, the place looked exactly like the pictures. Modern furniture, expensive lighting fixtures, and the omnipresent mirrors. The first time I walked past one, I reflexively glanced over and swore I saw something shift that wasn't me. Just a flicker, like a shadow moving behind glass. Jet lag made me irrational. I shook it off. That night, I remembered the first rule. Close the bedroom curtains by sunset. I pulled the heavy drapes across the bedroom window. For the second rule, I turned the bed so I wasn't directly facing the wall of mirrors that reflected the whole room. I rolled my eyes doing it. Paranoid eccentric, I thought. Then, I fell asleep. Something woke me around 3 a.m. At first, I thought it was the wind knocking the shutter outside. But then I heard it again. A tap. Not hollow, not wooden. Glass. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, rhythmic, intentional. I sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight slicing through a gap in the curtains. I turned toward the mirrored wall. The tapping stopped. I stared, trying to see past my reflection. Was it just my imagination? I stepped closer. The glass was cold, almost icy. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. I backed away, my skin crawling. Something about the way my reflection lagged, just half a beat, made my stomach drop. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I dismissed it. Sleep deprivation, new environment, stress. Still, I decided to cover the mirrors, just to feel better. I dug out the extra bed sheets and started draping them over the mirrors one by one, taping the corners with painter's tape so they wouldn't fall. It made the apartment look ridiculous, like a crime scene, but I didn't care. I felt safer. I spent the day exploring the city. Park Güell, tapas at Boqueria, street musicians on La Rambla. By the time I returned around dusk, I was exhausted, and the sheets were gone. Not fallen, gone. Every single mirror was bare again. Painter's tape balled neatly on the coffee table. I stood in the center of the apartment, breath shallow. Had someone come in? Was this a prank? I checked the front door, still locked. Windows? Sealed. My laptop hadn't been touched. Wallet was intact. But the notebook, it had changed. A new line had been added on the last page in bright red ink. You should have listened. I left the apartment early and went to a local electronics shop. Bought a couple of USB security cameras, nothing fancy, just motion detection and cloud sync. I spent the afternoon installing them, one in the bedroom, one in the living room, both aimed at the largest mirrors. I kept the rest of the mirrors covered again. That night, I left the cameras running and tried to sleep. 3:11 a.m. I woke again. No tapping this time, just the sound of breathing, not mine, somewhere inside the apartment. I stayed still, pretending to be asleep. The sound moved, slow and heavy across the room. Something brushed the edge of my bed. Then silence. I counted to 300 in my head before daring to open my eyes. Nothing was there. I turned on all the lights and sat up all night with my back against the wall. The next morning, I checked the footage. Both feeds had been overwritten. There were 5-second clips of static from 3:08 to 3:15 a.m., as if something had blocked the lens or fried the sensors. Then, a single frame. A man, pale, gaunt, in old-fashioned clothes, standing inside the mirror, not reflected, inside it. His eyes black as obsidian, mouth hanging open. I threw up in the sink. That night, the tapping came again, but this time, it wasn't alone. Voices whispered through the mirror, faint, overlapping murmurs, like a radio between stations. I screamed at the glass, "What do you want?" The voices stopped. Then writing began to etch itself onto the mirror's surface, slow, precise strokes, like a finger moving through steam. Play the game. I backed away. The notebook lay open on the kitchen island. Another line had been added. "You're already playing." I called Marta. She didn't answer. So I went to the cafe where we'd first met. She wasn't there, but one of the baristas handed me an envelope she'd left behind, in case you returned. Inside was a torn journal page, old and yellowed. "The mirror game is older than the city, older than the stones it was built on. It sees through you, learns you, and mimics you until you forget who you were. Do not speak to the glass. Do not try to cover it. Do not run. Play along, or it will punish you." No signature, no date, just a warning. That night, I decided to test the mirrors. I stood in front of the largest one, naked, vulnerable, every light on. "Who are you?" I asked. My reflection didn't answer, but it didn't mimic me either. It blinked before I did. I raised my right hand, it raised its left. A delay. Then, as I watched, it smiled. I didn't. And suddenly, it wasn't me in the mirror at all. The thing was wearing my face, but the eyes were wrong, too wide, too hungry. I slammed a sheet over the glass and taped it down. From behind it came a voice, low and raspy. "We liked your smile better." I couldn't leave. I tried, booked a cab to the airport, but the moment I stepped outside, the city changed. Streets looped into themselves. Buildings that should have been cafes were suddenly banks or pharmacies. I walked for hours, only to end up back at the apartment, key in hand. Barcelona was still there, but not my Barcelona. Not the one with sun-dappled plazas and churro carts. This version was wrong, dimmer, faded, like a copy of a copy. The game was closing in. That night, I didn't sleep. I smashed one of the mirrors. Behind it, cameras, wires, a small crawl space. Empty. But something scuttled away as I looked in. Something human-shaped, but too fast. I pulled out my phone to take a picture. The screen blinked, then went black. And then, one final tap. I turned slowly. All the mirrors were bare again. A line of text appeared, scrawled across every surface in red. You belong to us now. The next morning, I woke to bird song and soft golden light filtering through the bedroom curtains. For a moment, I just lay there, disoriented. The sheets were warm, the mattress firm. No broken glass, no red writing on the mirrors, no whispers, no tapping. Just quiet. Normal. The mirrors were clean, untouched, polished to perfection, reflecting nothing but a perfectly ordinary apartment. No pale figures, no black-eyed smiles, just me. Looking tired, a little pale, but me. Had it all been a dream? The notebook was gone, so were the security cameras, the taped-up sheets, even the old journal page Marta had given me. My phone worked fine. I had full signal. All the photos and video files from the past nights were gone, deleted cleanly, as if they'd never existed. I made coffee, ate toast, showered. When I stepped out into the street, Barcelona buzzed with life again. Kids laughing, scooters screeching, distant church bells ringing. The streets were normal. The sky was impossibly blue. No loops, no tricks, just sun-warmed pavement and people rushing to work. I passed the cafe where I first met Marta, but no one inside recognized me. I asked about her. They said there was no one by that name working there. Maybe I imagined her too. Later that afternoon, I walked back to the building to double-check the door. Curiosity, I guess. The apartment was locked. No signs of damage. No "for rent" sign. Just the quiet hum of an old elevator shaft and the distant murmur of a television from another unit. It was like I'd never been there at all. Like it had all just reset. Sometimes I catch myself staring into mirrors now, at home, in hotels, in airport bathrooms, just for a second too long, watching my reflection, wondering if it's really me. I haven't heard the topping since that night, but I keep the curtains drawn by sunset, and I never, ever sleep facing the mirror.
I rented the cottage because I needed to disappear. Not in a dramatic fugitive on the run sort of way, but more like a quiet vanishing. After the burnout, the sleepless nights, and the year that left me feeling like a smudged ghost in my own life, a solitary escape to Oregon's rugged coast felt like the only cure that didn't come in a prescription bottle. The listing was vague. No glossy real estate photos or curated welcome baskets, just a few grainy shots of a weather-beaten cottage nestled near Cannon Beach. What caught my attention was the lighthouse nearby, standing crookedly on a jagged cliff like it had been shoved there by the wind. That and the final line in the listing. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, no neighbors. Sold. I arrived just before sunset, my GPS long dead from the winding dirt roads and cloud-choked skies. The cottage loomed up from the sea mist like something half-remembered from a dream. Wood slats bleached gray by salt and time, a sagging porch with cracked rails, and moss-draped pines leaning in as though eavesdropping on secrets. The host had left a note on the kitchen counter. Handwritten, all caps. Rules. Do not open the lighthouse window after dark. If you hear foghorns and there's no fog, hide. Welcome, and enjoy your stay. There was no name, no signature, just those two rules and a smiley face drawn in blue ink that, for some reason, chilled me more than the note itself. I unpacked quickly, though there wasn't much to settle in with. The furniture was minimal, an old couch, a warped dining table, and a creaky bed with a mattress that groaned like it held grudges. The place smelled faintly of salt, wood smoke, and damp fabric, with a strange undertone, like rotting kelp or something left too long in a tide pool. I made a weak cup of tea from a dusty box of chamomile someone had left behind and took it out to the porch. The wind carried a hush howl from the ocean, rhythmic and deep, like breathing. The lighthouse stood silent, its windows dark, its top slightly canted. It hadn't worked in years, according to a faded plaque on the trail nearby. Then, I heard it.
Not the wind, not the waves. Wet, heavy, dragging. Footsteps. Footsteps on the deck. I froze. It started at the far end, where the porch curved behind the kitchen. I hadn't locked the back door. My pulse thudded against my eardrums as I stood there, the mug trembling in my grip. Step, step, slosh. I peered through the window, expecting to see, I don't know what I expected. An animal, maybe, a person. But all I saw was the empty porch, slick with seawater. Then, down near the tide line, something moved. A silhouette, waist deep in the tide, facing the cottage, motionless, not bobbing with the waves, not shifting with the wind, just still. I backed away from the window. My mind screamed that it had to be a trick of light, a rock, a piling, but it didn't feel like a trick. It felt like it was waiting. By morning, the figure was gone. The sun broke through a slit in the clouds, and the sea looked calm again, placid even. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, or a nightmare I hadn't realized I was still dreaming. I went for a walk. The pine trail looped behind the cottage and offered a sweeping view of the coastline. Along the edge of the bluff, the old lighthouse leaned out like it was peering down. The windows up top had been sealed with rusted hinges and salt-burned paint. But one looked newer, clear glass without grime. That's when I noticed something odd. The deck rails back at the cottage, just below the kitchen window, were smeared with wet handprints. Long handprints, human-sized, scraped and ringed with tiny barnacles. I snapped a photo and texted it to the host's number on the rental agreement, captioned, "Is this normal?" 10 minutes later I got a response. "Just seals. They crawl up sometimes." Seals? I might have believed it if seals had hands, or left barnacle trails, or stood upright in the tide at midnight. The foghorns started at 2:13 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I'd been staring at the ceiling, counting knots in the wood, unable to sleep. When the first low, mournful blast rolled over the landscape, I bolted upright in bed. There was no fog. The sky was crystal clear, full of stars. The second foghorn call shook the windows. I remembered the host's note. If you hear foghorns and there's no fog, hide. I scrambled out of bed, adrenaline sizzling through my limbs. Every instinct told me to run for the car, but something deeper, older, told me that outside was worse. I ducked into the bathroom, locked the door, turned off the light. The cottage had gone utterly silent, save for the distant rhythm of waves. No wind, no insects, just the sound of the sea and something else. A low mechanical click echoed from the bluff. I didn't believe it until I saw it myself. The beam from the lighthouse swinging across the night. It wasn't random. It moved with precision, sweeping the terrain like it was searching for something or someone. It reached the cottage. The white light scorched through the gaps in the curtains. It moved slowly, deliberately, then paused on the wall just outside the bathroom. I held my breath. Then came the scratching. Slow, measured, down the length of the wooden door. A dragging sound, like claws or nails etching a message I couldn't understand. I dropped to the floor, heart hammering, watching the shadow under the door. It stopped, and for a moment, I swear I saw it. Something bending at the threshold, peering through the gap. Not eyes, just darkness. Then silence. And then footsteps. Backward. Wet. Slow. Retracing the path it came from. I stayed in the bathroom until sunrise. I fled. No tea, no shower. I threw everything into my duffel and bolted. The air smelled like low tide and something coppery, like rust or old blood. I didn't look back. As I reached the car, I noticed one final detail, something I hadn't seen before. The cottage's siding, right beneath the bedroom window, was covered in tiny carvings. Names. Some were clear, some were eroded by time. All etched in uneven, jagged lines. Some dated as far back as the 1960s. Some had no dates, just initials. The last one read, Taylor, July 2017. Still watching. 2 months later. I hadn't told anyone, not really, who would believe me. But one afternoon I got a DM from a woman named Tessa. Her profile said she was a marine archaeologist based out of Astoria. She'd found my old comment on a travel forum, something vague I'd posted about weird footprints and foghorns on a clear night. Her message was direct. Did your rental overlook the crags west of Cannon Beach? Old cottage, lighthouse nearby? Don't laugh, but I've been researching something from the 1950s. I think it's the same place. We spoke on a call. She told me about the incident. 1952. A lifeboat from a local rescue team capsized during a storm. 7 men drowned, but the weather reports showed no sign of high waves or strong currents. What chilled me, survivors claimed something pulled them down. Not a riptide, not an undertow. Something with fingers, something that waited in the foam. One of the men who lived said before going unconscious, he saw figures standing on the shore, watching, tall, still, like shadows that forgot to leave with the sun. The cottage had been built on the site decades later. It changed hands often. Tenants rarely stayed for more than a season. The listing, Tessa told me, no longer exists. Delisted. No trace. No host contact. Gone. But I still see it in my dreams. The silhouette, half submerged in the tide, each time closer. Not moving. Just waiting. And sometimes, when the world goes quiet enough, I hear that foghorn. No clouds in sight, just stars, and the slow scratch of nails down wood.
I booked the cottage on a whim. I'd been scraping by in the city, cramped studio, endless deadlines, and that perpetual hum of sirens just outside my window. Vermont sounded like the perfect retreat. Quiet, snowy, nestled among pine-covered hills and frozen lakes. When I found the listing, cozy, historic cottage near Mirror Lake, I didn't even hesitate. The pictures were perfect. Antique wooden beams, a stone fireplace, a clawfoot tub. The kind of place you imagine reading a book in while snow falls outside. But there was one strange note in the listing. Please do not attempt to open the door at the end of the upstairs hallway. The nursery remains locked. It seemed innocuous enough. Maybe a storage space, or just part of the owner's private things. I shrugged it off. The host, Mrs. Endicott, was an older woman with silver hair tied in a tight bun and eyes like unpolished glass, cold, almost reflective. She met me on the porch when I arrived. "Rules are in the binder," she said, barely glancing at me. "Heat's temperamental. Wood stove's best. Don't waste your time on the upstairs door." There it was again, that door. Her tone wasn't angry, just resigned, like she didn't expect me to obey, but hoped I might. I thanked her, took the keys, and watched her drive away in a rusted blue pickup, tires crunching over the icy gravel. The first 2 days were idyllic. I slept better than I had in years. I walked along the frozen path down to Mirror Lake, its icy surface cracked like spider webs, reeds sticking out through snow patches. The air smelled clean, pine and old smoke smell. I even started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. A slow return to myself. But by the third night, things changed. It started with the crying. Faint, high-pitched, and rhythmic. It was the kind of sound that's not loud, but somehow slices through everything. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The noise came in waves, soft whimpers rising into sobs, then fading, only to begin again. At first I thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or injured fox, but as I listened closer, it became unmistakable. It was a baby. I got up and padded into the hallway. My socks slid slightly on the old wooden floor. The sound was coming from the locked door at the end of the hallway, the nursery. I stared at it, a simple white door with a brass knob, chipped around the edges. The crying stopped, just like that. Silence thickened the hallway. I waited another minute, breath fogging in the cold air. Then I went back to bed, convinced it was a trick of the wind, or the creaks of a very old house. Anything else. The next morning I found the binder. It sat on the small dining table near the kitchen. Inside, instructions for the stove, emergency numbers, and a note about nearby hiking trails. And in careful cursive near the end, a short paragraph. The nursery is sealed for personal reasons. Please respect our wishes. Do not attempt to enter or tamper with the door. The room holds memories, and not all of them are kind. That night, the crying returned, louder, more persistent. It wasn't just the crying. The air changed. Every time the sobs began, the room would grow cold. My breath would fog, and the fire would dim as if pulled inward, like the house itself was holding its breath. On the fifth night, something else happened. Around 2 a.m., I heard the music. It was faint at first, a slow, tinkling melody warped by time and dust. I recognized it immediately. Rockabye Baby, the kind of tune that should feel soothing, but in that moment, it chilled me. I crept into the hallway, flashlight trembling in my hand. The nursery door stood still, but the music was indisputably coming from behind it. I leaned in. Click. The doorknob jiggled, once, then twice. Something, or someone was trying to open it from the other side. I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs. The music stopped. The crying resumed. That was the moment I knew I wouldn't sleep again until I opened that door. It took me 2 more nights to work up the courage. During the day, everything felt normal. Bright sunlight, frozen trees swaying gently in the wind. But after sunset, the atmosphere thickened. The shadows felt heavier. The crying no longer stopped. It seemed to echo through the floorboards, right into my bones. I found a set of thin tools in the kitchen drawer. Old, rusty, probably meant for small home repairs. That night, I crouched before the nursery door and began picking the lock. It was harder than I expected, not just mechanically, emotionally too. My hand shook, my breath came shallow. It felt wrong, like I was trespassing somewhere I shouldn't. After a minute of fumbling, I heard a soft click. The door creaked inward. The smell hit me first. Dust, lavender, and something else. Stagnant water, like a damp basement. The room was preserved like a museum. Faded wallpaper with ducks and moons. A white crib stood by the window. Rocking chair. Shelves lined with stuffed animals. A small dresser with pink handles. Everything coated in a fine layer of dust. Except the music box. It sat on the dresser. A tiny porcelain thing with a ballerina twirling slowly on top of it, even though it wasn't wound. The melody, distorted and slow, began to play again. Rock-a-bye baby in the treetop. I approached the crib. Inside, an old baby blanket, yellowed with age, and a small pillow. The mattress crunched slightly as I pressed it, dry and brittle. And underneath, folded neatly, was a note. Just 4 words written in child's handwriting. She doesn't know she's dead. I stared at it, my throat dry. My hands trembled as I placed the note back. That's when I saw the lake. Through the nursery window, Mirror Lake glittered in the moonlight. A narrow footpath led through the trees down to the water's edge. It was beautiful and haunting, perfectly still. And in the middle of the ice, there was a shadow. Small, still. A little girl in a white dress, standing barefoot on the frozen lake. I blinked. She was gone. I tried to leave the next day. I packed everything, slammed my laptop into the bag, shoved my clothes into the suitcase without folding them. My hands shook the whole time. But when I tried the car, dead battery. Of course. I had no signal out here. I tried walking down the road, but the snow had thickened, covering the tire tracks. Everything looked the same, like the forest had closed in behind me. So I returned, back to the cottage, back to the crying. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the fire watching the shadows stretch and flicker on the walls. The music box played again around 2 a.m. Not faintly this time. It echoed from the walls like it was inside the house, inside me. I walked to the nursery. The door was open now, wide open, the crib empty. But the window was open. Snow blew in, frosting the sill. Small footprints, wet and bare, led from the window to the hallway, and then down the stairs. I followed. The footprints ended at the front door, and then just beyond it, continued into the snow, toward the lake. I should have stayed inside. I should have closed the door, burned the house down, something, but I didn't. I followed the footprints all the way down the narrow path. I didn't feel cold, didn't feel fear even, just a numbness, like I was dreaming. The wind whispered my name. The footprints ended at the frozen shore. There she was again, a girl, 6, maybe 7, standing in the center of the lake, blonde hair and curls, white dress fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. She turned slowly, and then she smiled. Not a sweet smile, not a child's smile. It was knowing, ancient. She raised one arm and pointed behind me. I turned and saw her again. Standing right next to me, the girl on the lake and the girl on the shore were both her, both watching, both waiting. That's when I ran. I locked the nursery door with everything I had, hammered it shut with nails from the shed, moved the dresser in front of it, blocked the hallway with furniture. But the crying didn't stop. Not that night. not the one after, or the one after that. And every morning, no matter what I nailed down or blocked off, I'd find the door open, the crib empty, the music box playing, a new footprint in the hallway, wet, small. I stopped sleeping. On my final morning, Mrs. Endicott returned. She stood on the porch, not surprised by my haggard face or shaking hands. "She followed you, didn't she?" she asked, staring past me into the house. "Who is she?" I whispered. "My daughter, Clara," she said. "She drowned in Mirror Lake in 1999, slipped under the ice. We never found her body, but she came home. A piece of her did." She looked at me, those glassy eyes no longer cold, but tired. "She doesn't know she's gone," she added. "We keep the nursery locked. We have to. That room is the only thing that keeps her anchored. If she realizes the truth..." Her voice trailed off. I left that morning, didn't wait for the engine to warm, just drove until the cottage disappeared in the rear view. Weeks passed. I tried to return to normal life, but the crying followed me. Sometimes I hear it in the shower, sometimes while I'm cooking, soft, but there, always at night. The worst part? Last night, I found my bedroom window open, and on the sill, a small, wet footprint. I arrived in Tokyo at the tail end of autumn, the city blanketed in golden leaves and wrapped in a soft chill. I'd booked a high-rise Airbnb in the Minato district, sleek, quiet, and just isolated enough to help me recover from a particularly brutal breakup back home. I needed time away, alone. Tokyo felt like the perfect place to disappear for a while. Millions of people, and yet the easiest city to be invisible in. The building was modern, glass and steel, humming with quiet efficiency. The host had left a detailed message, passcode for the front door, Wi-Fi password, and a final line in bold. "Please do not open the hall closet. It contains belongings of a former tenant. Thank you for respecting their privacy." Odd, but not enough to raise alarm. I figured it was just a polite way of saying, "Don't snoop." Maybe it stored cleaning supplies or old furniture. I wasn't here to dig through closets. The apartment was minimalist. Black leather sofa, rice paper screens, pale wood floors. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a glittering view of Tokyo Tower, lit red against the night sky. For a moment, I stood in the center of the living room and just let it sink in. Silence, solitude, and a city that didn't know my name. The first night passed quietly. I cooked some instant ramen, scrolled through my phone, and fell asleep watching the city lights flicker. But around 3 a.m., I awoke to a faint sound. Knock. It wasn't from the door. It was from inside the apartment. I sat up in bed, heart thudding. The sound came again, soft, deliberate. Knock. Pause. Knock, knock. It was coming from the hallway. Groggy and unsettled, I padded barefoot to the hall. At the end was the closet, the one marked off limits. Knock. 3 more taps. Not loud, but undeniably from inside. I stood frozen, breath caught in my throat. My brain scrambled for rationalizations, pipes, the building settling, anything. But the knocks had rhythm, intent, like someone waiting for an answer. I turned back, shut the bedroom door, and stayed up until the morning light erased the fear. The next day, I messaged the host. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Just curious, anything in the hall closet that could make noise? Heard some knocking last night." No reply. I went out for the day, visited a temple, had matcha in a tucked-away alley cafe, and wandered Shinjuku aimlessly.
but the whole time a weight sat in my chest, like I'd left something unfinished. When I returned, the closet was the first thing I checked. Still sealed, a single black strip of tape across the door. Faded kanji scribbled on it. I leaned closer. It read, "Do not enter." That night, I stayed up with the lights on. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock, then 2:17. Knock. Louder this time, 5 rapid taps. Then silence. I stood in the hallway, inches from the closet. My hand hovered over the knob. I could smell something faint, a trace of mildew maybe. Cologne? Old fabric? I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, sleep deprivation, or that terrible human instinct to touch the fire we've been warned about. I peeled off the tape and turned the knob. The door creaked open. Just a small space, about the width of a shower stall. Inside hung a single dark suit on a wooden hanger, dry cleaned but dusty. Beneath it, a black suitcase and an old leather satchel. On the top shelf, a yellowed passport. I flicked on my phone flashlight and opened the passport. Issued in 2003. Name, Shinji Watanabe. The photo showed a man in his early 30s, clean cut, polite smile. The last entry stamp was in 2003 as well. No exit stamp. I crouched and unzipped the satchel. Inside was a diary. Black leather. Pages filled with neat handwriting in English and Japanese. I flipped to the last page. Day 287. They still think I'm a guest here. The world outside moves on, but in here, time bends. The air feels thick. My shadow lingers after I walk. They can't see me now, but I watch. I listen. I live here now. I shut the door quickly and taped it shut again. But something inside me had shifted. That night, the knocking didn't come. Instead, it was humming. A low, tuneless melody, like someone humming to themselves just on the other side of the door. I pressed my ear to it. The humming stopped. From deep inside, a whisper. You opened it. I barely slept. By morning, my phone buzzed with a reply from the host. Hello, please do not open the closet. It is not safe. Please tell me, did you open it? I lied. No, just heard some sounds, that's all. The host replied in less than a minute. Leave the apartment today. Full refund. Just leave the key inside. Please trust me. I didn't know how to respond. The host was clearly terrified of whatever was in that closet. But I was terrified of it too, and of walking away without answers. Who was Shinji Watanabe? Why did he disappear in 2003? I called the police that afternoon. A young officer named Daiki arrived within an hour. His English was good, but he brought a translator anyway. I explained what I'd found, the passport, the diary, the sounds. I expected skepticism. Instead, Daiki grew solemn. You are not the first guest to report this, but you are the first to find a name. He took photos, bagged the items, and said he'd investigate. When I asked if anything else had happened here, he just said, there are things that should be left alone. That night, I packed my bags. I decided to leave the next morning. At 4 a.m., I heard the front door unlock. I froze in bed, heart pounding. I knew I'd locked it, every bolt, every chain. Soft footsteps moved through the apartment. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped into the hall. The closet door was wide open. The suit was gone. I backed away slowly, then turned to bolt for the exit when I saw him. A man in a dark suit stood in the reflection of the window, facing me. Pale skin, dark eyes. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I spun around. No one there. When I looked back at the window, the reflection was gone. I checked out before sunrise. I left the key on the table, didn't wait for the elevator, ran down 13 flights of stairs, and didn't stop until I was on the street, breathing cold, honest air. Later that week, Officer Daiki called. He said no body had been found, but the passport did match a missing persons report from 2003. Shinji Watanabe, a visiting businessman, stayed at that apartment, vanished one night. No signs of break-in, no security footage, just gone. I asked him what he thought had happened. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Sometimes places don't forget, and sometimes guests don't leave, even if the world does." 6 months passed. I'd put Tokyo behind me, mostly. Until one day, a friend texted me a link. A new Airbnb listing. Same building, same layout. But the closet wasn't mentioned at all. The last line of the description? "Perfect for solo travelers. You'll feel right at home." I keep having the same dream. I'm in the apartment again. The city glows outside the window. The air is too still. The suit hangs in the closet, waiting. I hear humming, and then knocking. Always 3 knocks. Then silence. Then the whisper, so close to my ear I can feel the breath. I live here now. And sometimes, when I wake, I swear I can smell that faint trace of old cologne. And I wonder, did I ever really leave?
I booked the pod on a whim. After weeks of burnout and screen fatigue, I told myself I needed a detox, something raw and off-grid, but not totally uncomfortable. I found the listing buried in an obscure travel site under the section titled Rewild Yourself, a luxury ecopod in Oregon's Willamette Forest. It claimed to offer the perfect blend of sustainability and indulgence. "Live in harmony with nature," the host wrote, "in a pod designed to breathe with the forest." The photos showed a sleek glass and wood structure nestled between towering Douglas firs, like a minimalist spaceship landed in the woods. The place even had 5 stars and dozens of glowing, if oddly poetic, reviews. "Felt like the trees were hugging me," read one. "You'll never want to leave," said another. That last one stuck with me. The host, someone named Marla W., left a message after my booking confirmation. "Thank you for choosing SymbioPod 7. Just one simple rule. Do not touch the exposed roots inside the structure. They're sensitive." I chuckled at first, assuming it was part of the eco-friendly branding. Maybe the roots were part of some irrigation system or a gimmick to seem more one with nature. I should have listened more carefully. It took me 6 hours to reach the site, with the last 2 on a gravel road that wound through impossibly thick forest. I lost cell service 20 minutes in. When I finally arrived at the pod, twilight had already dipped the trees in orange and indigo. The pod was even more beautiful in person, rounded like a cocoon, its outer layer shimmering slightly with rain. It looked alive. The door unlocked with a soft chime as I held my hand to the panel. Inside, it was warm and cozy, with a low hum like distant wind or a quiet engine. The interior smelled of cedar and something faintly herbal. Ferns hung from baskets near the kitchen. Natural light filtered through smart glass windows, adjusting their tint with the sun's angle. And yes, the roots were real. They snaked along parts of the floor and walls, thin, woody tendrils that pulsed slight, not touch. I remember standing there, staring at them,
One twitched. That night, after a hot herbal bath and some tea left in compostable sachets, I slid into the linen-draped bed tucked near the curved wall of the pod. The soft drumming of rain on the roof was soothing. Until the scratching started. It wasn't the erratic scuttling of mice or raccoons. No, this was slow, rhythmic, dragging. It came from under the floor. I sat up, heart pounding. "Probably just an animal," I whispered, though it sounded too deliberate. I used my phone's flashlight to peer beneath the bed. My breath caught in my throat. There, pushing through tiny cracks in the floorboards, were hair-thin roots, dozens of them. They squirmed in silence, like blind worms searching. Some were pressed against the underside of the bed frame. One was coiled loosely around the metal leg. They pulsed softly in the light. I backed away and didn't sleep that night. By morning, they were gone, vanished. The floor was dry and clean, with no sign they had ever been there. I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, stress, sleep deprivation. But then, the sink water came out brown. Not just muddy, murky, foul-smelling, like wet leaves and iron. I caught a handful to sniff. The stench was overwhelming, earthy, metallic, and something else. Copper. Blood? I texted the host through the pod's internal network panel. My message was short and simple. Water smells off? Roots under floor? Is that normal? 5 minutes later, a reply came through. Marla W. The forest is thirsty after last week's guests. I stared at the message. Was that a joke? I tried calling. The screen blinked once, then froze. No signal. I spent the rest of the morning walking the area. The pod was isolated, no other structures nearby. Just the forest. Deep, old, watching. Branches swayed without wind. I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, something slithering down trunks. A deer stood near a clearing, staring at me with eyes too wide, too still. When I returned, something had changed. Inside. Vines had creeped in through the kitchen vent, thin green tendrils trailing across the counter. One had curled around the handle of my coffee mug. Its tip was submerged, as if drinking. The mug was empty. I stepped back, and then I saw it. Strands of blonde hair woven into the roots near the shower drain. I have black hair. That's when the panic began to claw at me. I turned to leave and froze. The front door wouldn't open. I tried everything. The panel was dead. The manual override under the floor hatch was blocked by a thick, gnarled root that had grown over the latch in less than a day. I was trapped. I screamed, banged on the walls. Nothing. At 3:06 a.m., I heard the gurgling. Low, wet, like something digesting. It came from inside the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The pod was groaning, like a stomach preparing to vomit. And then, whispers. Faint at first, then louder, close. Stay. Feed us. One more. Still warm. Don't go. Don't leave. I clamped my hands over my ears. The lights dimmed. The entire pod felt like a throat, warm, pulsing. I backed into the living room, heart racing, and noticed something behind the wallpaper. A tear. I ripped it back. The wall beneath was covered in deep gouges, fingernail grooves, long, desperate. I stumbled away and saw them everywhere, beneath the bed, behind cabinets, on the ceiling beams. This place wasn't a home, it was a feeding chamber. I didn't plan my escape, I reacted. I grabbed my backpack, forced open a small window with a kitchen knife, and squeezed through. Thorns tore my arms. The forest was pitch black and full of fog. Every direction looked the same. The ground squelched underfoot, wet, alive. Roots burst from the soil behind me, slithering toward the pod. I watched in horror as they wrapped around it like a cocoon. Glass cracked. Metal groaned. Within seconds, the pod was half swallowed by a massive Douglas fir. I ran, barefoot, bleeding, sobbing. Branches lashed at my face, roots grabbed at my ankles. Once I heard the whisper again, this time closer. Warm, warm, stay. I didn't stop running until the trees thinned and I reached a ranger station road. I was found at dawn, huddled and shivering near a fallen log. Authorities drove me back to civilization. I told them everything, showed them the GPS pin, showed them the host's messages. But Symbiopod 7 didn't exist. The listing had been deleted, the website gone, the profile, Marla W., was a ghost. I insisted they check the area. A team was dispatched. They found nothing, just forest. But a week later, a hiker reported something strange deep in the woods. A Douglas fir taller and wider than any nearby trees. At its base were signs of unnatural growth. Roots formed into jagged patterns like script. Embedded in its trunk were rusted zippers, a half-buried hiking boot. Inside the boot, a foot bone. The case was quietly closed. They say the Willamette Forest is ancient, older than the oldest logging maps. They say some trees drink more than sunlight and rain. On foggy nights, hikers report hearing things, whispers that thread through the branches like smoke. Stay. Feed us. And every so often, another listing pops up online. A luxury pod. Eco-friendly. Off-grid. With one simple rule. Do not touch the roots. They're sensitive.